How you doing, Mark? What's happening?
I'm good, Mike. How are you?
Good, thank you. You know, tell me what's new. Tell me what you hear. Are you still looking at July 1st? Has anything changed? Is anything new? Anything new to report? Give me an update.
I don't think there's much to report, unfortunately. There's about 100 plans that are going around as rumors and being considered, and the only thing I can tell you is that from talking to people, MLB certainly still plans on playing a season at some point this year.
Right.
This June 10th spring training, July 1st opening day thing that was being floated a couple of days ago. I've heard that is not a locked in stone kind of thing.
Do you think they are now committed to playing in everybody's parks? Do you think that's now the plan? Is they've moved back to that now? They're off the idea of playing in only a couple of hubs. They're now looking to play at everybody's parks?
It sounds like that's where we might be headed. Again, I think this is such a fluid situation that whatever it seems like it might be today could be different tomorrow. But the idea of everybody gathering in one space or, 2 or 3 cities certainly seems to have lost some momentum in terms of, what's being reported. And, to me, the travel is the toughest part if you're going to play in everybody's home city.
Right.
But teams all travel on charters. They all have their own, travel situation where you're not sitting for 2 hours at the gate like the rest of us when we go fly. And so there's probably more of a controlled environment for teams to travel in. Again, like everything else that we're hearing about in the country, the testing is going to be, probably the biggest thing, the biggest hurdle that they're going to have to clear.
What do you, when you talk to players, what do you hear is the biggest fear? Is it health concerns? Is it how much money they want to get paid? Is it playing in empty ballparks? Is it legitimating a season? What is the thing you're hearing from players?
The guys that I've spoken to, health is definitely the biggest concern. Just being able to, they all want to play. Even in stadiums without fans.
You think they all want to play, number one. Number two, you think the salary thing is a big obstacle, or do you think it's less of an obstacle?
It's going to be an obstacle, but I have to have faith that both sides are going to realize that if everything else is set up where there's a way for the game to return, and players are going to hold out over money, that's not going to be a good look for them.
Oh, they're going to get clobbered. They're going to get the country won't forgive them. They will not forgive them.
Correct. And even if young guys, probably even if they have to make less than their in the minimum, that's money they probably need. The guys who are making $35 million, they've got plenty of money. Look, it's going to be contentious. I'm sure it's something they're going to have to deal with, between the union and the league. But I think if you ask me what the biggest concern is, it's probably health. I mean, that's, we've seen what's happening around the country and around the world, and these guys don't want to put themselves in danger with families. A lot of them have wives and kids, and parents or grandparents who they may not be able to see for a while. Whatever it may be, I think health has been, like everybody else in the country, health has been the biggest concern about, they all want to play, but they want to do it safely.
It's a tricky thing here. We're talking about Mark Feinsand. It's a tricky thing because they want a legitimate, state-of-the-art testing, which they demand and they deserve. That's who they are. They deserve that. But they know they can't be out front of the country with this, where they can't get something the rest of the country doesn't have. And since we've not seen anything from the country, not from states or not from the national government, I think that's really held them back because, there isn't the testing protocol they're asking for. We don't really – maybe they can demand it and get it, and they can hire either a lab or a service to give it to them, and they can pay a fortune for it, baseball or the NBA. But we haven't seen that yet. We don't know where that exists.
No, that's true. And, you've heard stories about other leagues who are, all these leagues who have said, if they're able to get those tests, they will also – contribute X number of dollars to put more testing into states. And, so it doesn't just look like they're buying it for themselves. But you're right. That's, for all these leagues and for, a lot of businesses, it's just a matter of getting the tests and having enough of them. And that's why I think when you hear any of these leagues talk about, sort of the biodome plans, like, the NBA going to Vegas or Orlando,
the bubble or Vegas,
all of that.
Yeah.
It makes sense because there's more of a way to control them. But baseball is a different animal with the number of teams, and the NBA starts its postseason. You got 16 teams.
Yeah, the NBA is playing a smaller sample. You're playing playoffs, and it's a smaller team.
Number of teams, and every week half the teams will be eliminated.
Baseball is different, absolutely. And I've heard, and you talk to more people than I do on the baseball front, but what I've heard is a big issue is they want to know that their travel is completely secure and that they feel that airports are acting in some level of normalcy when they arrive at an airport. They don't want this to be where they're just out there by themselves. They want to feel like the country's not completely normal, but at least to a level where they feel like they're going into a level of normalcy when they travel from city to city.
What's funny about that is that there's nothing normal about the way professional
right. I mean, they're spoiled to begin
with.
But I mean, they don't want to be like in like a bubble or an incubator when they go from city to city. They want to be able to be exposed at least. Like they want to feel like they're almost now they're not in a normal existence as we know, but the idea that the thing that was mentioned to me was we want it to be like there's a level of healthy travel in the country, not just us traveling, that kind of thing.
Right. Well, that's going to be tough to sort of figure out whether that's the case or not. It's funny because when baseball teams or any sports teams, when they play a night game and then they fly to the next city, they're getting to the airport at an hour where there are no more flights.
Right. And they hit the tarmac. They never touch their bags. They go they go on a private jet and they sit down. That's it.
Then they land at 4:00 in the morning before the airport and that city's open. It's funny the idea that sports teams don't travel the way regular people travel, not just because they're on a charter, but the hours that they generally fly. So,
right.
I think it's the way of travel probably wouldn't be much different for those teams where, like you said, you're driven right to the
They don't want any threats is
and,
what they don't want. They don't want to walk into a city where they don't know what's going on in that city. They don't want to walk into a city where they hear that there's an outbreak in the city they're going to, that kind of thing,
Hey, it's hard to blame them, That's I think, again, that's where it comes back to their biggest concern for most of the people involved, and this is what you've heard everybody say, whether you're talking about, commissioners, owners, GMs, players, et cetera. You have to make sure you can do it safely, or it doesn't necessarily make sense to do it.
All right, is there I asked this to the NBA guys, and I said, is there a drop-dead date? And they said, you know what? Everyone wants to crown a champion. I think somehow they'll crown a champion. It's different for baseball. They have to play a season. Is there a point that you've heard about discussed where there's no legitimacy to their season anymore?
I haven't heard that discussed. I mean, if you think about it, most people have speculated that you'd want to get a minimum of 81 games in, half of a season at the very least, to feel like a real season. So what does that mean, right? The 81 game mark is pretty much July 1st.
And even later, if you want to play a doubleheader every week,
doubleheaders, and also if you want to push it back where the postseason goes into mid to
which
late
has
November.
been discussed too. Your World Series could be in December. It's been discussed.
So there are ways to do it. I haven't heard of any drop dead dates. I think, like I said at the beginning, I think there are so many scenarios and situations being considered that it's more of a matter of they need to figure out when they can potentially make this realistic to get everybody back in the ballparks, and meaning teams, not fans. Fans are
fans.
Story.
We have no idea. Now, what happens with minor league baseball and with top prospects? What happens with them this year?
That's another thing that one of the many situations they're going to have to figure out. I don't get the sense that the minor leagues are going to happen this year.
Right.
Those teams.
And then you're going to want to carry more. I mean, do you want to? I mean, does that mean you elevate that really good young player because you don't want him not to play this year? So now instead of him playing in AAA, he comes to the majors this year. You got to look at something like that too.
Yeah, I mean, that's a possibility. I think there's also a likelihood, if there is no minor league season, that you end up with bigger rosters.
That's possible, right?
Or, taxi squads.
Well, you're going to have bigger rosters anyway because you're going to have more pitchers. You know that, yeah.
Right, but, maybe taxi squads or something like that.
So it could mean that the guys who are top, like if you were going to list the top 10 guys who you knew were going to start in AAA this year, the top 10 prospects, they might all start the season in the majors this year.
Yeah, that's very possible. Right now, with the way everything's going, I don't think anything's off the table. I think every team is going to look at every aspect of it and every scenario and consider anything. This is one of those years where, assuming that there's a season, there's nothing that's going to be off the table in terms of how teams approach their year.
Now, I wondered about this too, Mark. We're talking about Mark Feinsand. If you are a bad team, do you treat this as a non-season, or do you think, hey, I'm only playing 80 games. Who knows if I ever get good for 10 games? If I have a hot streak for 10 games, which we all know the worst team, unlike other sports, in baseball, the worst team usually wins a third of its games. So,
yep.
And the best team usually loses a third of its games. That's the history of baseball. So that means, we've all seen Baltimore play well for a week. Does it make them attack it as I have a chance, or is it, this season's just not even worth discussing?
Well, I think they attack it like they have a chance. I mean, the one thing is all of the off-season stuff was done. So teams put their teams together. They signed players. They traded for players with the expectation of this year. The rosters aren't going to be much different. Now, maybe a bad team looks at their top prospect and says, I'm not bringing up this guy.
Right.
Or
do you move players earlier? Do you move players like you give up early? Like you say, hey, you know what? I'm not going to wait, to give up in August. I'm going to give up early this year, Well,
we'll have to see when a trade deadline would be. I mean, it's not going to be a July 31st trade deadline, you would figure. So when is that trade deadline going to be? How many games into the season? Will they just sort of prorate it where it's, 2/3 into the season, the way July 31st is? That, like I said, there's 100 questions they're going to have to answer. I think if anything, you'd see some of the teams that, are not expecting to have big years. Maybe they say, I'm not calling up that top prospect to get him a full year of service time for 80 games that we don't expect that we're going to be able to do anything anyway.
I think, and I didn't address this on the show today, Mark, but I think I will at 6 o'clock, but I really think we're moving into a different phase now in the country. I really do. Because I think what's going to happen is, let's be honest, this isn't working very well. It's not working well very economically, and there's still a lot of people dying. So I think there's going to come a point where they're going to say, listen, you're going to have to start to take your health care on yourself. If you're someone who, in the inner cities or where people are very poor, we'll be there as a government. We'll help where we can. But if you're, the regular part of America or the middle of America or, a middle-class person, you have to go to your job, go to your job. You don't think you have to go to your job, stay home. Take care of your own health. You know where you live, where you are in your stage of your life chronologically. Young people can go do what they need to do. And I think you're going to see them maybe say, you know what? We did as much as we can do. Let's try to put the economy back and take our chances and take care of your own health individually. We'll test as much as we can. If that's the case, I could see maybe them saying, we're not going to keep the ballparks empty. What we're going to do is we're going to restrict a little bit, but let people in the parks rather than them be completely empty. I could see that being the case. Rather than an empty ballpark because of the size of it, maybe we only sell every third seat or every other seat, or only families can sit together, or something where there actually are people in the ballparks, maybe just not enormous crowds in the ballparks.
Well, here's a couple of questions with that. If you're going to let families sit together, how do you prove that you're a family?
Right. That's you're letting people. You're going to have to trust people in some of these things. I mean, you're not going to be able to play. You're not going to be able to play warden. You're going to say, if you sit next to that person, I'm going to feel like you comfortably can sit next to that person.
Well,
that kind of thing.
The other question I think, Mike, is let's say that you're going to say, okay, we're going to sell a third of the tickets that we normally sell. What's the operating cost of the ballpark? Does that make financial sense for the teams to do? With
you're going to have the park. You're going to have the park open anyway, though.
Yeah,
I mean,
but if there's no fans in the stands, there's not going to be a concession stand open. You're going to have to basically, open up the lower level, the clubhouse level for the
right.
The
well, I'm saying you might, what I'm saying is
maybe a press box, but I'm saying the operating budget for a ballpark with no fans in it is going to be a lot less than having to open a ballpark.
Well, food's going to change radically anyway, because people are not going to eat food that's cooked in front of them anymore. It's going to have to be packaged differently. We know that all. I mean, let's be honest. Concessions are going to change forever. I mean, that's.
Just think about stadiums. Just think about stadium security, though, right?
Yeah, the stadium security is going to be an issue no matter what. I mean, you're still going to have to secure the stadium, even if only the players are on the field.
Right, but obviously with a lot fewer people than if you have 15,000 fans.
But I just actually think that we may actually see people back quicker because I give you an example. The Trump statement this afternoon, hey, we can't keep it closed forever. We may have to understand that more people could die, that there's not much we can do about it. We have to get the country open. If that becomes the thought process where you have to police yourself a little more, I wonder how sports wraps their arms around that. I think my guess is that sports will follow, the safety guidelines first, and then see how the rest of the country is reacting, and sort of see what's working. But it's hard for me to, it's funny sitting here right now. Especially in this area where it's been so hard hit in New York and New Jersey, it's just hard to sort of wrap your arms around the idea of, or wrap your head around the idea of things being back to normal anytime soon, where you would have fans in the stands. But 2 months ago, right now, I was still in spring training, and I don't know where this is.
I've been in my house for 2 months. So
right.
2 months from now, who knows what it could look like?
Because I don't know. See, I almost come to the conclusion now, and listen, I think athletic events are going to be the last events, like concerts, athletic events. They're going to be the last things that are back. I mean, they're going to be at the bottom of the list. Anything where there's big crowds, concerts, anything like that, or athletic events, spectator sports, they're going to be the last events back. I agree with you on that. There's no question about that. But I just sense that there may be this feeling like, you know what, we tried this. It's not working very well. We don't really have a plan. Let's be honest. And we get to a point where we say to people, "You do what you need to do for yourself, and we'll take it from and we'll all do the best we can do." How does sports wrap themselves in that kind of economy and that kind of culture if that's where we're headed? I mean, because I could see us a little bit heading back in that direction, especially since let's be honest, they can't keep the country closed forever. There's nothing they can do. And the country's still closed in a lot of places, and we're still seeing a lot of people are perishing by the day. So, I mean, it's a crazy. Listen, I don't know. Again, you're not going to come to an economic solution here. This is a biological issue. It's going to need a biological solution. I mean, that's basically it. I mean, the question is, what are we going to do until then? Are we all going to sit and wait? And sports is going to be last, I agree. But if they're going to move everybody to a more open country in the next month or so, I wonder then how long does it take sports to get back to at least where there may be some people in the stadium?
Yeah, I mean, the one difference between sports and concerts or Broadway theaters or things like that, of course, is that Billy Joel's not going to play the Garden if there are no fans, and Hamilton's not going to play on Broadway if there's no fans, nobody in the seats. Whereas sports has the television aspect and certainly can begin getting back to normal.
Definitely can.
By playing games and having them televised. I think it'll all come down to what they believe is safe and what they believe makes economic sense for them. And
you are in an open air ballpark, so it's
most of them. There are a few domes
there's a couple of domes,
there,
but I mean, it's going to be interesting to watch. None of us have an answer, obviously, and we don't know how long this is going to take. But it's going to be interesting to see how long they say. Well, you know what? Are we going to let them? Any people in, or are we going to keep it completely closed when we're dealing with these stadiums on a hot summer night? It's going to be interesting to see how that unfolds. Do you have any thoughts that there won't be baseball this year?
Right now, no. I've just heard too many people involved in the game, whether it's from the league side, a team side, people from the player side, who just believe that there's going to be some sort of season this year. That seems to be the intention. And until all plans have been exhausted, and you hear, somebody come out and basically say we don't think this is going to happen, I do think that the plan is to have baseball at some point this summer.
Do you think there will be at the start? Will there be media in the ballparks, or there'll be no media in the ballparks for baseball?
Good question. I would like to know the answer to that. I don't know the answer to that. I think, it wouldn't surprise me if some of the broadcasts are done from a studio.
I would think they would be. Now, if
ballpark.
that's the case, do you have a pool reporter or no reporters? I mean,
a pool reporter could make sense, rather than having a full press box of people, but I don't know. I mean, that's
Have you heard anything about that? Have you heard anything?
I have not. There's been so much just waiting to see when the games are even going to happen that we haven't heard much. But, then, of course, you wonder if media is going to be allowed in the ballpark. Would media travel? They're not going to be on a team plane.
I don't think media will travel. I
don't think so either.
I don't think media.
Writer, you're not going to be getting on a flight every 3 days.
Most of the broadcasters I've talked to feel that they will be doing the games off in a studio somewhere away from the facility. That's what
team broadcasters travel with the team, so that wouldn't
But I think that I don't even think they'll be traveling. I think that the feeling is that most of the broadcasters feel they'll be in a remote position.
Yeah, that wouldn't surprise me. I mean,
And then maybe you just have a pool reporter at the ballpark from each town where, let's say, the Mets are in town, so Feinsand goes and he's the pool reporter, or for the Yankees and he's the pool reporter. And after the game, you get some quotes, and then you're there. You'll have an official scorer who's, I guess you consider him part of the game anyway, so like an umpire, right? So, but you have that, and you have maybe a pool reporter. I mean, it's going to be, hey, we're in a different world. There's so many things to think about that we haven't even thought about,
it'll be interesting because then you're in a spot where, especially in New York, where you have so many newspapers and so many media outlets. So you're going to have one pool reporter there, and they're going to feed the same quotes to the Times, the News, the Post.
I guess
it's nobody. I haven't even thought about that just because
you've seen it in the playoffs in the NFL. They do that. I mean, you've seen that happen. Where they've had pool reporters at practice and stuff.
But you still got people there. Every paper has their own person there. There may be one specific interview where.
Right. But I'm saying the one guy's allowed at practice, and he's the pool reporter, that kind of thing. So, I mean, that could be done logically. I mean, it's not optimum, obviously, but
ideal.
Not at all. But I mean, this is obviously a very, very different world that we live in.
This is ideal.
Hey, listen, I was saying this to someone the other day. We were talking about it. I said, we've seen what's gone on in the newspaper business anyway in recent years. We're obviously in a digital revolution, as we know, but we're going to see broadcasting is going to have a very, very tough return from this. This is going to be, if you're talking TV and radio, this is, that's still considered to be present day media versus newspapers, which are considered to be old-fashioned, versus the new digital, where you guys all have made the move, like you have and everyone else has, to a digital component, which most of the media has. But I think it's going to hit broadcasting very, very hard, very hard.
Yeah, I think in general, the whole media industry is going to look a lot different. You wonder a lot of these media outlets who have had layoffs and furloughs. When everything starts coming back to normal, will they go back to the way it was before, or will they decide to work on a smaller staff? You hope that
in the beginning, I think they'll be on smaller staffs. In the beginning, I think they will be. I think they'll ask their regular people to do more. We've had that, like, as Fan as an example, as being a powerhouse radio station and a premier radio station, as leaned on its contract people and backed off using a lot of its, part-time people. I mean, that's how it's, because they wanted to cut expenses. I mean, I think everybody's done that across the whole country. That will start to wane, but it might take a little while.
Yeah, I think unfortunately everything in this country is going to take a little while to get back to the way it was, if it gets back to the way it was. But
we're going to see some changes. I mean, the funny thing is, we're clearly going to have changes in medicine. A lot of people are going to work from home. Changes in the finance industry. Wall Street could be different. There's talk that there might not be anybody on the floor of the exchange anymore, as an example. What do you see at the ballpark that changes radically? Anything that you can think of?
Well, I think, like you said, the food is going to, be something
I think for sure.
That certainly changes. I think people are going to be a little hesitant to, go and take a hot dog from a vendor the way they used to.
Open food is going to be a problem. There's no question.
Yeah. And, for a while, even if and when fans come back, I think, sitting next to a person in the cramped confines of a stadium seat, the way that, if you have the Yankee Stadium sold out and you're packed in there, I'm not sure people are going to be comfortable. I think you're going to have to see masks. I think a lot of people are going to voluntarily wear masks, everywhere in public for quite a while. And, I think it's just going to be a different look to it. But I think you're right about a lot of people working from home. And I have a friend who owns a company in Manhattan, and he decided that they're not renewing their lease of their office because they've been working optimally, with everybody
you're
working
going to
from
see
home
a lot
on
of
Zoom
that.
and everything else. And I think you're going to see
a lot of that in radio too. A lot of
I
that
don't think
radio.
that happens as much in sports, but I think generally speaking, that's gonna be a big trend. I think
You're going to see a lot of that in radio too. A lot of that in radio. A lot of that in medicine. A lot of that in finance. I agree. We're talking about Mark Feinsand, of course. Interestingly, when you think about, we talk about all these different twists and turns and all these little changes in baseball. When you think about the operation of the team itself, do you see any changes there technologically? Anything that deals with this team itself, or do you think that's pretty much business as usual?
I think that's pretty much business as usual. One area where obviously there's going to be some early issues is just scouting. Guys being out on the road and
even using advanced scouts will probably change, right?
Yeah, a lot of teams have already changed advanced scouting, and there's so much video available in every game, in every angle, and StatCast, and this and that advanced scouting has already changed a lot. But, right now, scouting's going to change early on just in terms of the amount of travel that they do. Scouts are on the road, 200 days plus a year. But I think as far as the rest of the game, I don't think there's going to be any major, shakeups in terms of changes to the way people do business because it's, it sort of is what it is.
So you do think there'll be a sport? Do you have a timetable? Do you think they're shooting still for? Have they backed off, or you think they're still shooting for the 1st of July?
I'm not sure that it was ever a concrete plan to begin with. That was a report out there the other day that was shot down early, and I'm not sure that was as fixed in everybody's minds as it was made out to be. I think they'd love to get back. If you could, tell me right now that they would start July 1st, I think, most people in baseball would sign up for that.
What do you think they need, 25 days or more to get ready?
I think probably 3 weeks sounds about right. It's really about the pitchers building their arms up, but like we said before,
they're going to carry extra pitches.
They're going to carry extra pitchers, so you're not going to have pitchers throwing 100 pitches necessarily when the season starts, whenever that may be. So, 3 weeks seems like a reasonable amount of time. Right now, I think position players, when they report in regular spring training, get about 5 weeks. Pitchers get 7. So, 3 weeks, because they're not all starting from zero. You have to assume they've been throwing wherever they live and trying to keep themselves in somewhat shape. And they had been in spring training for almost a month when it disbanded. So, 3 weeks seems like a reasonable amount of time.
We're almost 2 months into this. I'm someone having been in this business now 40 years, and as a guy who watches games every day of the week, all year long. I was telling my son the other day, I said, you know what? I don't know that I've gone 2 days and not watched a game in 30 years. I mean, maybe Christmas Eve Christmas Day I watched the NBA. So, So I don't think I've gone back-to-back days and not watched or been at or watched the game in 30, 40 years. I have to admit, that part of it has not been as crazy as I thought it would be. It surprised me. Have you watched a lot, as someone who watches a lot of games, and are you just a baseball guy, or do you like other sports?
Oh, I love other sports.
Okay.
I love all the sports.
All right, so you're an all-around sport guy. Have you watched a lot of games? Have you watched a lot of old games, or have you watched no games and just a lot of television?
Mostly just a lot of television. I've caught some. There has been some throwback games on MLB Network I've checked out and stuff like that. And but the problem is a lot of the games that they're playing, like NBA Finals games that they're replaying, are stuff from the last 10 years. That if you showed me old Lakers Celtics games from the 80s,
I watched
I might be more interested in watching those.
I got caught up in a Piston Laker game where the Pistons with Larry Brown killed the Lakers, and I was trying to, and that's a team that's such a forgettable team. When you think of Larry's team with Hamilton and Wallace and all those guys,
Yep.
and they killed the Lakers with Shaq and Kobe. And I was watching the clinching game when Larry won a championship, and I was like, boy, you know what? It was just, it seemed like it was 1,000 years ago. And I watched the Phi Slamma Jamma game which I was at in Albuquerque in 1982 when Valvano beat Houston, and watching the game, I knew Valvano very well, and had been with him the day before when we all listened to him tell us how they were going to surprise everybody, and we all thought he was nuts, and we thought, oh, you're going to get killed, and how they won that game. When I watched it again, I said, it's still a miracle. And then I also realized how good Olajuwon was. It almost jumped off the screen how good Olajuwon was. And other than that, I've watched the Jordan thing. That's it. I haven't really.
After seeing the highlights of the '93 Knicks Bulls series with Charles Smith the other day, I don't need to see any basketball for a while.
I remember those series. Dog and I used to go to every one of those games. We used to go to every game at the Garden. And we used to go to Chicago. We used to go to the Madhouse on Madison. We loved to go there. We even used to go there. We even went to the Phoenix series. We went to the finals. Dog and I went to Phoenix and Chicago for the finals. We used to love to follow that team. And we went and did the finals with them. And you know what? There were a couple of times where I have to admit, I said, maybe the Knicks have a chance, and then they'd always have their heart broken. And the Knicks had some good teams then. They really did. They never had the second scorer. They never had the second scorer who you could count on every game. That was the biggest thing that killed them.
Yeah, I've been explaining to my kids how the Bulls used to just beat the Knicks.
Oh,
just
like
in some
a rented mule,
different heartbreaking way every year. I've had my kids watching the Jordan documentary with me, and my kids are 15 and almost 12, and kids that age are like, oh, LeBron's the best player ever. I said, guys, watch this documentary and let's talk about it again.
It's funny. I've had that because I have boys 15 and 13 also, and they're huge fans, and they obviously know Jordan well, and we've discussed that, and they've watched it. The thing they said is when I came on the screen the other night, they go, Dad, that's not you, is it? That's not you. I said, 30 years ago. They go, that's not. I said, yes, it is me. So they were like, no, that can't be you. So they were killing me when I came on the screen the other night.
You'll get a laugh out of this, Mike, but my kids said the same thing to me about you. Because they met you. You met my kids outside the Garden about a year or two ago. And that came up, and I said, that's Mike. That's Mike?
Yeah, my kids said that to me. Yeah, that's it. It was a little heavier version than these days. So and a little darker hair. So
I would say a little darker hair. We all had a little darker hair.
A little bit, yes. Well, listen, good talking to you. Stay safe, and hopefully you're back doing some baseball soon. So hopefully
you got it.
Thank you,
Mike.
Mark, very much. Mark Feinsand back after this.